The following is a conversation with Johnathan Wu, an Ivy League alumni and online mental health coach. A mutual friend recommended us to connect, and based on the overlap of our interests, I already had a pretty good inkling that we would have a good conversation. Fortunately, Johnathan did not disappoint. This conversation is a good demonstration of how good conversations are like a dance of ideas and respectful challenges in order to shape and improve the concepts that we have in our minds. Johnathan is intelligent, compassionate, and funny. He has great ideas on topics that are impactfully relevant to the young professional in 2023. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I genuinely hope that the topics discussed add value to the lives of all listeners. Without further ado, my friends, here's Johnathan Wu. I'm just starting to realize how rusty I am with navigating Discord.
That's okay. It's
Yeah.
probably good then.
I guess you have a lot of
Not a-
experience because you're a coach and all.
Yeah, I do all of my work like through Discord.
Oh, okay. Well, you actually,
Yeah.
like, it's your full-time job or like a part-time job or?
I would say in terms of hours spent, it is my part-time job, but I'm sorry, in terms of hours spent, it would be part-time, but in terms of what I view it as, it's my full-time job.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, what does that mean? Like, do you have a full-time job that you are just like less passionate about to make ends meet, and then this is like what you want to spend more time in eventually, or?
No. So this is my full-time job, meaning like this is the only job that I have.
Oh, okay.
But in terms of like the amount of time that I actually spend on coaching, it is around like 20 to 30 hours. So that's like within the part-time range. I
Okay.
think it's just that if I get more than that, I tend to get a little bit sort of burned out. Just like as an introvert, like talking to people on one-on-one intense sessions is just sort of a lot for me personally. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, in terms of like making ends meet, like fortunately the job does pay enough. Like it's not exorbitant by any means, but it does pay enough to get the bills covered. So I'm fortunate in that sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Would it be helpful for me to talk a little bit about like what it is that I do?
Sure. Yeah. I guess what's your educational background? I know you met Michael at UPenn, right?
hmm
Okay.
Yeah, so my educational background, I graduated from Penn with a bachelor's in their version of neuroscience. It's called the biological basis of behavior. It's
Mm.
just a mouthful, but it's essentially a blend of like neuroscience and a little bit of psychology, a little bit of sociology and whatnot. But that was what I studied in undergrad. I It's actually known for being essentially a pre-med
Oh.
major at Penn. So I actually was I wanted to be a doctor, probably starting in like middle school or even high school. And so that was like my intention. But I had a really rough first year in college,
Mm.
and it never really I never really kind of found my stride throughout my 4 years in college. So I ended up graduating with like a 3.0, which is not horrible, but it's also definitely not good enough for medical school.
Mm.
I was dead set on becoming a doctor though, so I continued to. I worked for about a year and a half as a medical scribe. I know I've heard horror stories about people like doing it in like ER settings or like with people doctors who just are like not very respectful, and that's really horrible to
Yeah.
hear. But I think in my case, it was actually a really positive experience. I worked with this really nice like 83-year-old doctor who was like he was a primary care physician, and I was basically the only thing keeping his practice alive because, like, their whole hospital is transitioning everyone to, medical, like electronic medical records, and here he is, like, still doing paper
Oh my
documents. So he
gosh.
was
Okay.
doing, yeah.
It's actually like the
Uh,
boomer thing where you have to be the one to like take care of the tech side of things for them.
yeah, I was doing everything tech related for his office for about a year and a half.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a good experience and also gave me a good break from school because I think I definitely needed one.
Yeah.
And then I was fortunate enough to get into a master's program. It was a master's in medical science. So it's if you're familiar with like the pre-med track at all, like you have the option of either doing a post-bac or what's called a special master's program.
Okay, yeah.
I ended up getting I ended up doing a special master's program at Brown,
Oh wow.
which was also an absolutely wonderful program. Nothing but the highest praise for what they're doing over there.
Yeah.
I was able to, and in that instance, I was actually able to get like a 4.0, which was really helped boost my confidence and my resume. Um, Afterwards, though, I did apply for medical school. Like two, you can kind of count the third one, but I applied twice. Was very crushed to realize that like medical schools were looking for other types of candidates.
Mm.
And then by the third time, I think I was halfway through the process where I just decided like I kind of made peace with the fact that like I think you know the universe and God, maybe this is not the place for me.
Mm.
And I think that what I actually want to do is to heal people. And at that point, I had actually found, Healthy Gamer, and I was working for them, and I was, doing really great work as a coach already. And so I think like that was probably what kind of gave me that small inkling that like maybe like the physical health field is not really the one for me, and maybe I do want to start to transition and open up my options of like where I could see myself spending my time and directing my career. So that's where I'm at. I've been at Healthy Gamer for going on 2 years now. Yeah,
Oh
two
wow.
years and a couple of months. And I'm now doing personal coaching, so like one-on-one stuff. So that'd be most akin to like a life coaching or a mental health coaching. I'm doing career coaching, so for people who have like progressed through the personal coaching and come to a place where like, yeah, I feel so much better and I'm like feeling happier about my life, but also I hate my job, so I like want to work on that. So that there's that aspect. And then I'm also doing parent coaching, so I also see parents and help them better understand the kid and communicate with the kid and set boundaries. And I think like to be honest, like the parent coaching is actually my favorite.
Wow.
Because I think like that's where I'm essentially helping cut down on parental trauma at the source, when the kids are still kids, as opposed to having to heal it like later on down the line, which can be a
Yeah.
tough and process. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. I think one of the first things that I noticed about you was like you have a very you're like very pleasant to talk to. Yeah, like I just immediately feel at ease to just kind of like talk to you about anything like right away. Um, was there any like special training that Healthy Gamer had to make you seem like more approachable, or is that just a trait that you've had even before working for them?
Interesting. I have to think about that a little bit. Uh, I think the answer is a little bit of both, right? So I think like naturally speaking, and this is something that I maybe even talked about a little bit in my interview for this job, which was just that like even going far as like middle school, I think I kind of like to play like therapists and to like talk to people and like hear about what they're struggling with and to just kind of like comfort and to offer my limited assistance at the time. Like I didn't actually have any training, but I think what coming to Healthy Gamer and receiving training and better understanding both like myself and coming to a certain level of peace. I think the more at ease that you are with yourself, the less that you can kind of seep into like maybe or the more that you can kind of sit and take a back seat and then let the other person kind of take the front row.
Huh.
Right. And I think that there are also just ways to kind of help people feel a little bit more at ease, like by I think the really common thing that people talk about is like active listening, and it's as simple as like asking open-ended questions as opposed to closed-ended ones. Reflective listening, which is something that requires a little bit of practice, but I think everyone should try to do a little bit more of,
Mm.
which is just like instead of offering your own perspective, you're kind of just like holding up a mirror and then seeing if other people kind of actually if like what you're understanding is actually correct. Right.
Mm.
So it's sort of the most common way to say to reflect is just like sorry, like that sucks. Right. That's weirdly enough, that's a reflection because what you just said is like affirming that like that sucks.
Mm.
So those are like just a couple of things that kind of help to give you the sense that like, hey, you're feeling understood, that you want that you're heard, and that like I'm actually understanding you. I think like that's it's both a mindset as also maybe some level of values that maybe I grew up with. Yeah.
Gotcha. So like, you said you feel like because you feel more at ease with yourself and I guess you're pretty comfortable in your own skin, that allows you to kind of take more of a back row and make the other person like stand in the spotlight and give them the opportunity to talk about themselves. So like what are some of the things I guess you've experienced that allowed you to feel so comfortable in yourself or like at ease with yourself? Because I know a lot of people, um, when they are listeners, when they try very hard to be listeners, um, it's often because they're like anxious or don't enjoy speaking. Like there's almost like it's almost like a symptom of like a baseline anxiety or like a lack of self-esteem. But it seems like with you, it's the other way around, where you are comfortable with yourself, and that allows you to be a better listener. So,
Mhm. That now that you mention it and now I'm reflecting on it, I think like that probably is where it started off, where it was like from a sense of um, centering the other person over myself because I did struggle with having a sense of self-worth, and I even think I don't want to portray myself as someone who's like figured it all out. I think developing self-confidence and self-worth and value within oneself is like a lifelong journey, especially depending on. I think for the people who are fortunate enough to have parents who like love them unconditionally, like maybe that isn't so much the case. But I think for most people, it's going to be like a lifelong process, and I'm somewhere along that process. And I think I've come to a place in which I am feeling more confident, and so I don't need to let my uh what I've got going on like dictate the conversation. So I think like you're right that somewhere along the line it like flipped. But to answer the first part of the question of like how did I get to this point? Um Simple answer is a lot of failure, right? A lot of like I think like not making it through into medical school and also like having multiple failures in undergrad definitely can take you down like several notches. I think I grew up with a very like large ego because I thought that I was very like smart and could do a lot of stuff, and I was like somehow special, and then I go to this elite college and find out I'm anything but special, and in fact I'm even subpar in like most of my classes. And then also I like because I was like doing so well in school, I never actually had to learn study skills and whatnot that like now I had to be now I realize, or I didn't actually realize it at the moment, but I just like at the time I couldn't even tell that I just didn't know how to study and also didn't know how to ask for help. And it was sort of a toxic combination that like led to me feeling incredibly stuck. So all this to say, I think surviving failure and getting through it absolutely leads to a level of like confidence because like
mm,
turns out like I can I can suck at things, I can fail, I can be bad at talking on an interview with you, and I think I'll be okay. Like, will it hurt? Like, sure, but since when has like pain uh, yeah, since when has pain been the reason that like we shouldn't do something? And I think like, yeah, this time may not pan out perfectly, but I'll get through it. And I think like having that sort of self assurance of like I've been through way worse. I've made a fool of myself and felt that and cringed and done all that stuff. And so by comparison, like whatever like life kind of has to throw at me, like has there's some level of confidence that like I'll be okay.
okay, yeah, I guess just back to because you were just talking about like the um, going to this elite school and like having to face failure so much in that environment. Um, like even to just get into this school, it took probably a lot of sacrifice and a certain mindset to be admitted, right? Um, do you remember like uh, do you remember how like how palpable that sacrifice was, or like um, like did it feel like it was something that you really earned through like your toil, or was it just like you were just doing your like like a normal amount of uh, like responsible things, and it just kind of fell in place. You know what I mean?
Hmm. That's a tough question to answer because I think like what even is like normal? I think like if we're going based off of an objective point of view of like what is normal, then you have to take the average or the mean of like what a average high schooler experience is like.
That's true.
But I would say that from my subjective experience at the time, I
Mm-hmm.
don't actually know if I felt like I was necessarily sacrificing because of the way that I was brought up, that in which my parents really focused on achieving in school and just like there was almost just sort of the expectation was A's, and anything below that was like some kind of failure because I was capable of getting A's, so there was no reason or excuse to get less than that.
Mm,
Does that kind of make sense? So
gotcha.
my subjective experience is that like I was just doing what I was capable of, which felt good because it led to like some level of social acceptance by my peers. I went to like a fairly competitive and nerdy high school.
Mm,
Combined with like, my parents never like necessarily gave me the option to do anything but that. Which
mm,
is not it's certainly one style of parenting, and I think I could probably talk more about that.
yeah.
um but I think before we even kind of address that, I think to kind of answer the other half of like why I think that I've come to a level of more self-assuredness too. I think it would be remiss of me to leave out the fact that like I actually have lost like both of my parents, both to like cancer and
Oh my
separate different
gosh.
occasions. Yeah, I mean, uh, which obviously is very tragic to hear, like as a third party person. But and I think like it obviously, but I think it's a huge part of like who I am today.
Mm,
Where I lost my mom in 2016, so it was and she was diagnosed when I was a junior in high school. So from my junior year of high school all the way up till my senior year of college, like my mom was suffering through ovarian cancer, which is a very deadly form of cancer that's not nearly as well understood or well researched. So
mm,
she went through multiple rounds of chemotherapy and whatnot. So that was very difficult on my family for sure, as well as my own mental health. So like if you can imagine struggling through having them like going to this elite college with all of this expectation of trying to perform well and to make my parents proud, combined with the fact that I actually didn't know how to study, I was not prepared to like perform well, combined with being on the opposite side of the country from my mom, who was like suffering, and knowing that my family was to some degree like struggling without like me being there, was just like a lot for me to kind of get through,
mm,
which I think, and that was the case for like many, many years, or, the 4 years at least in undergraduate, at least, which I think definitely played a role in, my academic performance as well. So,
mm,
and then my dad was diagnosed with bladder cancer in, I want to say 2014, and then he eventually passed in 2020. That one was also really difficult because in the 2 years that I was applying for medical school, I was also acting as my dad's like caretaker. So I was, basically lived with him and took care of his like medical needs, which were very extensive at the time, and it was definitely emotionally very difficult as well. So
mm,
I think it's with that kind of like backdrop to me that it's not even just like the academic failures, but also the fact that like I've gone through really difficult times and experienced really deep depths of like sadness and pain and loss, that it it is a little bit easier for me to say that like, whatever life throws at me, I'll probably be okay.
mm.
And I think, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely, man. That's so tragic to hear that this all happened to you so young, and you I mean, you weren't even out of school yet, so like you weren't really fending for yourself, like financially at least, and just to be, yeah, I'm sorry that, that's heavy. um,
Yeah, so sorry to just to update you. Like I think while I definitely understand, or I really appreciate I'm painting a picture, you're feeling it, you're empathizing. I love that. Thank you so much.
mm,
I think like where I am now today though is that I am in a much more stable place. Fortunately for me, my parents were very diligent about their finances, which has afforded me now like a level of security, and I do have a safety net. So I think like that is also yeah, like my current role does pay like my current bills, but I also don't necessarily need to be like sort of quote unquote like investing and all that stuff. Like it does alleviate some financial burdens for me presently. So
mm,
I think like that's part of the blessing that they've like imparted to me. And also, I think I've done a lot of like emotional work with a therapist of my own, and as well as like through my job and understanding like different types of like spirituality. I have come to a level of peace that like life is, um, reality is reality, and we can and um the way I see it is that my parents absolutely loved me very deeply, and I the same. For them, I absolutely love them as well. And I don't think that like love is ever really destroyed. Like I think love is essentially energy, and um, if we think about you know Newton's thermodynamic laws, like energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And I just think that like
mm,
that love is continues to be with me and will be with me for the rest of my life. And I'm um, just grateful for the fact that love even existed, because I think that there are so many instances or families or relationships in which there is like lovelessness like in the family, and that is the truly tragic um, thing for me to hear about like fairly regularly. I think like a lot of my clients, struggle with depression and anxiety as a result of being in families in which like the love was not nearly as like palpable, um,
mm,
and was very like conditional, and that really can mess with someone's identity even earlier on in one's life. So uh, all this to say, like I really appreciate you empathizing with me. But I think I'm not really someone to be who like uh yeah, I'm doing good now.
gotcha.
and I
And
and I really mean that, yeah.
yeah, wow, that's a relief to hear, and that's so beautiful. Like the Newton's law analogy of love. I never really heard love painted that way, but it's really incredible. And yeah, I was gonna say like I had a friend who told me that like her ability to empathize with other people. She also lost a parent, and before that incident in her life, she wasn't really able to empathize as deeply. It's almost like
Mhm.
it um, tragic as it was, it like unlocked a deeper like emotional capacity for her, both to handle new adversities in life and also just to be able to understand people and support people better. Um, so there was like some new life that came from that event in a way. Um,
Mhm.
I guess just to switch from the topic a little bit,
Sure.
like it's really tragic that some families um, there is like a complete lack of love, or like you said, it's conditional. And then in other families, love is more like the love is there, but it's expressed in a really bad way that can be very traumatic in itself. Um, yeah, at least like for me when I was growing up, like it felt like my parents were like almost forcing me to do a lot of things that weren't really in line with my goals, and um, I had to kind of do a lot of soul searching in college when I was finally like on my own. Um, but I guess for you, um, did your dreams align with the direction that your parents raised you in, or were they, um, did you have to like reinvent yourself, so to speak, like once college began, to um, to begin pursuing like your actual dreams?
Hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, by the way. I think like it's so difficult because I think it's really easy to sort of maybe think about things as sort of cut and dry as like my parents didn't support me like whatsoever, or they like really just did not do anything to support my personal goals and whatnot. And I think that's definitely just not the case for me. I think like my family, like many families, and I would say even most families, was very gray, where there were certain aspects of their love that were in fact conditional and very conditional upon like my grades and performance and
Mm.
attitude and respect and things like that, right? But then there were also times, albeit maybe far, it may have been far and few between, but there was instances of unconditional love, of showing compassion, of hey, like you didn't do so great on that test. Like, what actually happened? Like, what do you need? How can I support you? Like, there were instances of that as well. And I think like that's what makes it so tricky is that like love can, like, love can be conditional, and also maybe there's some underlying love that maybe isn't so obvious, but is also there's unconditional love there too. And I think that's what can be really confusing is, we try to paint them in one or the other.
Yeah.
But in my personal case, yeah, in my personal case, I think I was like so deep in this, I was so lost in the sauce that like, my whole identity was based around my sort of like intellect and ability to perform well in school, right? So like
Mm.
if you're a smart kid, what do smart kids do? It's like you got three options, right? It's like doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? Or whatever, but whatever like the Asian tiger parrots sort of say, right? But it's only the respected these sort of like high status, high paying, very established, safe careers were the only like options afforded to me. So like when you given those options, I always sort of saw myself as sort of like a little bit soft, a little bit like more emotional, probably more emotional than maybe what my dad would have wanted from me. So, of the options, like I didn't particularly like math, didn't really like to argue with people. So,
Mm.
of those three, like doctor is it, right? You got to go care for people. I like people. I like taking care of people. I like healing people, which is still true of myself, right? I think like
Yeah.
that part is still core to who I am as a person. So I think like, but when those are your three options, like, yeah, then you're gonna, try to shoehorn yourself into becoming someone that you're not. I think the part of me that like I failed to sort of um, account for is that people who are pre-med and like go to medical school are actually like they're totally like book nerds. Like they like love to study. Like their ideal weekend is like going to the library and shutting the world out and like learning about the human body, which I think like that just wasn't me. And there's nothing, I'm not saying that is a bad thing or that like what I am is better or worse. We're just like different, right? It's just like, the people are just like Baskin Robbins flavors, and like some people like some flavors over others, but none of them are inherently better or worse.
Mm.
So I think going back to this idea of like, I think I'm still trying to figure out what my dreams are because I spent I'm going on 29 now. I spent 28 years of my life, like, or actually, well, 26 years of my life, like, I just assumed that this was my dream. And only recently have I started to give myself the freedom to say, there are other things that I can spend my time doing and like thinking about and
Mm.
growing and working towards. So, um, if anything, I'm maybe stuck a little bit on the side of too many options now where it's a little bit paralyzing. I'm stuck in this analysis paralysis, like too many options. And well, if I'm taking everything that I know about myself and chucking out the window and starting from square one, then uh, what even are what even what's the use of dreams, so to speak, as opposed to just like determining like what do I enjoy right now,
Mm.
What do I actually, how do I want to spend my day and working on crafting that day for myself and then repeating that day after day after day, and then letting opportunities uh, open to me as they come. And I think that's like why I'm a lot more open to new experiences these days. And I think like even this conversation is an example of me just sort of, if I was too trapped in my, oh, I need to be like focused on my goal and everything has to like, build up to that goal, then I would be saying no to, other opportunities like this. So I think it's a
Mm,
completely different sort of mindset or way to approach like operating on a day-to-day life.
gotcha. Um, that sounds like a pretty good problem to have. That if analysis paralysis. Paralysis doesn't have the best connotations, but if it's like if you have so many like potential interests that it's hard to commit to any one, and it's hard to just do tasks along that one singular vision. That seems like almost a good problem to have because it sounds like you at least have some amount of self belief that these are like viable paths, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I talked to a friend recently who was also like an Ivy League grad, and he was like one of the math geniuses of our high school back then. It's really funny because he was friends with someone who um, he became like a multi-billionaire. Um, and I graduated college in 2013, so I'm not much younger than you, maybe like 2 years. But yeah, that guy was, I guess he was your age, but that guy became a multi-billionaire, like crypto guy, FTX, Gary Wong was his name.
Okay.
Yeah, but like, and then this guy was like, also like Ivy League dude, like super gifted in mathematics. Um, and I just remember back then, like a lot of kids would look to him and just be like, "Oh, he's gonna be super wealthy in the future," um, and I guess I kind of just assumed that what drove his passion for math was like making bank one day. Um, but I talked to him, and especially after we found out about like Gary Wong. Basically, Gary ended up his crypto thing like uh, became a whole mess, and it was kind of like I think it was like some kind of scam thing going on. He's in prison now, but and then after he made the news recently, I talked to this friend, and he basically said like, no, he never really. It wasn't like money that drove his passion of math. Um, and if anything, he thinks that just wanting to get rich in itself is like a weird goal to have because there's just so many ways of doing it. Um, but I guess like for you, did you ever have dreams of like making a lot of money that propelled you into like an Ivy League university?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I was never, so my privilege is going to show here, but I think I grew up like pretty securely like middle class.
Hmm.
Meaning like we weren't like living lavishly, but on the other hand, like my basic needs were met, and I never had any experiences of like, homelessness or not having food on the table and things like that. So I lived a very like secure life. And so as a result, I never actually, one of the downfalls of that is that I never really like learned the value of money. And
Oh.
so I'm actually one of a really like weird case in which like, I'm not, I'm not like, what is the word? I just don't like, I've never really been all that motivated by money. And I'm actually, if anything, only now or more recently am I thinking about, or am I learning about finances and educating myself on personal finance, how to set things up, like what is the way to, set up for retirement and all that stuff. I think like that's a very recent development for me. So like growing up, I didn't want to go to an Ivy League for the purposes of money. I was actually more of like a do-gooder where I believed that like I was going to use my intellect to like help save the world,
Mm-hmm.
and whether that be like through medicine, I guess, right? So, again, these weren't like very well formed or fully thought out or fleshed out ideas. I even to this day, and I don't know if I'll ever grow out of this, but I tend to be a little bit of like a head in the clouds type of person,
Mm.
where very idealistic, and um, I think I very much value sort of my like ethics and morals, and more so than um the amount of uh money is that's in my bank account. But
Mm.
yeah, I think different strokes for different blokes, and I think like I do think that the pursuit of just money is I don't consider it a bad goal, but it is a weird goal because, as you said, there's a lot of ways to get there, as well as money is essentially just power. And so, with more power, you get more options, but it still doesn't give you a compass as to like what do you actually do with that power.
Mm.
Um, and I think like the generally speaking, people who maybe obsess or really make like money their end goal come from a place of extremely they come from backgrounds in which they did not have power, and so the idea of more power and even unlimited power is very tantalizing,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Yeah.
in actuality, like it's still, even with more money, there's still no direction as to like what do you do with it?
Mm.
Um, because it's just a tool.
Yeah.
And money, I think, just makes you more yourself. So whatever was there beforehand, money
Mm-hmm.
gives you the power to do that.
Oh wow. Huh. That's an interesting way to see money. Yeah. Um, would you say that as a, I guess, as a spiritual but not religious person, would you say that you're like not very materialistic then?
Yeah, I wouldn't get, it's all relative, right? I mean, what is materialistic other than, a label that we would like throw on, that we used to like label certain people. But, relatively speaking, compared to most of my friends, I don't know. I feel like I'm about average. I enjoy being comfortable, right?
Mm.
And so things that I do invest in is like I really enjoy, like I have a purple mattress. I like love that, which is not the cheapest mattress out there.
Yeah.
Um, I also, I like to game, so I have like a gaming desktop. It's not top of the line, but I built it myself with some, middle of the road parts. So like, I mean, does that like fit the label of like materialistic? Not really. I mean, I'm not out buying Lamborghinis, and not that I have the capability, but like, I'm not buying like the most expensive, newest, brand new thing all the time.
Mm.
But I'm also not like super frugal to the point of like I need to like penny pinch and be living, what is it, like a monk lifestyle, or
Mm-hmm.
aesthetic.
Asceticism, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm forgetting the word, but
Mm-hmm.
an ascetic lifestyle where I'm purposely making things like more difficult or more sparse for myself. I'm not really a minimalist, although I think that if I do want to actually like maybe move more towards like the minimalism um sort of mindset, because I think it makes life simpler, and I think like our world is becoming increasingly more complex, and I think the only way to really combat that is to simplify the things that don't really matter,
Yeah. Totally
so that
agree.
we can pour more of ourselves into the things that do.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, we have a limited attention economy, and I think like one thing that I've noticed in our society is just like people's attention spans are just so spread across like different mobile apps sometimes that uh, the interactions that you have through each app is like pretty shallow. So
Hmm.
one thing that I'm like mindfully doing is like I've been on Snapchat for a while now, like on and off, but I have like a streak, which is just consecutively snapping, of almost 2 years now. So once I hit that 7:30 mark, I think I'm just gonna like get off the app and purposely just like you said, pour more of myself into just a few apps a little bit more deeply, and hopefully use the internet as a real tool for connection rather than inadvertently using it to have like worse worse interpersonals, because I think that happens a lot, unfortunately, which I mean you probably have some experience with this. um, yeah, it's just kind of crazy that these really complex smartphones have made uh, depression kind of increase, like and it's like it's kind of like insidious, because you think that you're more connected with something like so instant, but people end up losing on these like real interpersonal interactions, either like video calls or like real in-person um, you know community or quality time, because all we have are these like these apps that people are just very spread thin in.
Yeah. I think this is a perfect. I mean, I almost want to go on a whole tirade about like digital identities and digital interactions and relationships. Which I probably will do a little bit of, but I also want to segue into the fact that like I just wanted to comment on the fact that I too am trying to use digital technology and the internet to deepen further relationships and or deepen relationships and also create genuine connection. It's why uh it's kind of a double-edged sword. So
Hey, what?
a double-edged sword
Oh, okay.
because I think like we wouldn't be able to do this if not for like the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same and also I wouldn't even be able to like do my job, in which I think is a like net positive,
Mm-hmm.
right? That people can speak to a coach or a therapist um like from the comfort of their own home, which can be really healing because like then they don't actually have to it doesn't you don't have to go outside to deal with potentially you know it removes the barriers to receiving help and connection that you may actually face. At the same time, though, and I think I'm stealing this from Dr. K, who is the founder of like the company that I work for, right? I watch a lot of his content and whatnot, but I think his analogy like works perfectly for me, which is that I think internet relationships are like fake cheese where
Mm.
like it looks like cheese, it tastes like cheese, it smells like cheese, but it's not cheese. And I think
Mm.
like internet relationships fulfill so like just enough of our human needs for connection that we almost mistake them for real ones.
Mm.
But I think that's both a good thing in the case of like COVID. So like studies actually showed that people like kids with robust internet relationships actually fared better in the like during quarantine as opposed to kids who like didn't have those connections,
Hmm.
right? So like the fake cheese will get you by, like it's still calories in you,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, it sometimes if we mistake the fake cheese for real cheese, then we're actually not being uh like nourished, and then that's a really quick way to like get malnourished when we are assuming that these internet relationships are sufficient.
Wow.
So
Huh.
I think a better I think the best use for the internet, and I think like I don't know how we could even begin to like shift the culture, but I think yeah, let's use these internet relationships for good and for connection and whatnot, but let's not also lose sight of the fact that we also need in-person interaction, communities of people who we can touch and feel and smell. Weirdly enough, like
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not, the smell is like one of the biggest um senses that's like closest attached to our amygdala or hippocampus. So this is it's a sense that like is completely like detached. Like I can't smell you, like, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm not picking up on whatever pheromones that you're giving off, and like
Yeah, you
that's
can't
a
taste me
sign that I'm
either,
not.
which really sucks.
I also can't I can't taste you, right? I should be able to taste you, and I think like there's we are missing out on certain aspects of relationships. Like it's just not the same. And yeah, I think the internet would probably be best used if it was for the purpose of fostering more in-person connections
Yeah.
while also connecting us even on a fake cheese level to the people and communities that that are inaccessible otherwise. right,
Right.
on the other side to the world and whatnot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it really like I think for a lot of people, myself included, um, COVID like so like I was a gamer before lockdown and I was very over like I just started working like the year before lockdown and I was feeling very burnt out, very like overstimulated with like things at work. Because you know like up until that point in my life I think I was just like very like whatever like lackadaisical about details, but once I started working like for at least 40 hours a week I would be like hyper attentive to every detail because I just wanted to have like this perfect career where I was attending to like every little thing for the sake of our patients. And I was just really overstimulated with like the in-person office environment. um, but I realized I used to retreat to like my little gamer cave and find comfort there, because it was like a form of connection that I could like manage in a sense. Like I could turn it off when it was overstimulating. But yeah, like COVID and lockdown, like being in that like what was once like a therapeutic environment for me, but only having that option made me really like crave in person again, like the richness of it, and like you said, like all the five senses, and you know just being able to share a meal with someone or like you know read someone's nonverbals in person and see like the embodiment of their presence in person rather than just virtually. It is you know it wasn't something that I really wanted before lockdown, and in a way, like lockdown really gifted. It was like a blessing, in that it really made me appreciate like in person things a little bit more. Um, but yeah, I have a feeling that we can really get into this, like this topic of internet relationships a lot more in the future. And I just before we like take that rabbit hole, um, I did want to ask since you mentioned working with Dr. K. Um, like what? Because I also heard our mutual friend say that you had interest in creating content, um,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, and you've mentioned that you've been kind of like analysis paralysis about it. Um, I guess what is your vision with creating content that is different from content creators that already exist? Because you know, when you mentioned Dr. K, like I had a vision of doing like gaming analogies to teach like mental health lessons to people because I always thought
Mm-hmm.
that certain aspects of mental health seemed obvious to me, or like certain platitudes or like pearls or like you know some kind of like solution to a mental health issue. That style of teaching, like using analogies, especially gaming analogies to teach like life lessons, it always seemed like almost second nature to me, and it felt very therapeutic or like cathartic for me to impart that gift on someone else who
Mm-hmm.
couldn't like crack the code in their own life or their own like psychology, to get out of a mental funk. And so like I really wanted to make content like that. And then once Dr. K started making his content, I was like, oh, well, here's a guy that actually went through med school. So who am I to even try this? You know, like this guy's got it in the bag
Sure.
or whatever. Um, so yeah, and I think that's just like something that I've always struggled with is with creating content is like if there's someone who does what you want to do a lot better, why even try? Like what value can I add to this space, you know? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of asking the question, but like yeah, what is the vision that's like different from, you know, what's already existing?
Yeah, and I think I'm resonating a lot with that, to be honest with you.
Mm.
Maybe not so much with Dr. K. Well, because I think so to directly answer your question, I have no vision, right? Which is why I haven't even started. So I am even further behind than you are in this process of finding what you're going to talk about, your niche, like and putting yourself out there. I'm like even further behind than you are. So, take this all with a grain of salt. But I'm just going to kind of parrot some of the stuff that I've incorporated or I've ingested from other YouTubers and other readings and also maybe even just my own musings here of just that like just because someone else is doing it better than you doesn't mean that you shouldn't still put your stuff out there because like
Mm.
even if you have right, so like the gaming let's just say like there is a niche in the YouTube space for gaming analogies.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it have to be only occupied by like Dr. K and Healthy Gamer as opposed
Mm.
to Dr. K Healthy Gamer can be maybe even the dominant player in that niche, but
Mm.
there are other people not even competing for, but just like inhabiting that same niche.
Mm.
Right? I don't necessarily think that we have to think about just because the algorithm maybe like pits people against you, as you said, like we live in like this attention economy,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that we have to view it in that way. Like let the algorithm
Mm.
do its thing, like whatever. Um, but on the other hand, if anything, once the algorithm realizes there are multiple creators trying to do this particular thing, and
Mm.
these are the people who are connecting with it, and that population is growing too. Like eventually, the algorithm, in theory, would sort of like amplify that. So I think if it more of like rather than me being needing to be distinct or separate or somehow unique, instead I'm just like, why can't I just be the megaphone? Like, why can't I just like amplify the resonance and the messages that like work for me, and then put that through my own filters and my own perspective, and
Mm.
inherently, because it's coming through my perspective and my like life experience, like it's inherently going to be unique.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good way to. That is like a vision in itself, you know? Like it's not necessarily a vision like with tangible goals attached, like I don't know, financing certain parts of it, for example. But it's a vision in that it's like a beautiful it's like a beautiful gift that you can picture imparting onto society and like helping people as a result. Um, yeah. Um, yeah, I never really thought about it that way, but I think that really helps. You know, any new creator really who's going through that same sort of thinking and maybe feeling uh, like like they're not special because there are so many like accomplished creators in the same space already. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's a really good way to see it.
I think it's a healthy way to see it, and I think it's a mindset that will probably help you keep making content. I don't know because again, I'm even further behind on the process than you are. I don't know if it will lead to any amount of success, right? I think like what the successful YouTubers would probably say is something along the lines of like you do need to be unique and you need to like leverage your edge or what's your unfair advantage, as well as like, take what other people are doing and like do it better, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is like a very competitive mindset, which doesn't I think that probably will work for some people, but I think for other people that may not that kind of mindset may not work too well because maybe they do struggle a little bit more with like that self-confidence, and I think I probably fall into that boat too of just like I need to just work on getting set in the idea of just try, amplify the voice. You don't have to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
uh getting your and then also like the sense of like you're comparing yourself to people who have like multiple years of videos or podcast episodes who've been doing this for like years and years and years.
Yeah.
Yeah, compare yourself to the person who's just starting, right?
Right.
Or just compare, even better, compare yourself to the closest comparison, which is
Mm.
like yourself yesterday
Yeah. Yeah.
or like the previous episode. Is my next episode just make my next episode 5% better than the last one?
Right.
And like
Right.
if you do that enough times, it I think it compounds,
Yeah.
at least conceptually, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It's really good to think about. Yeah. I heard like similar things. In the, I watched like the doctor or not doctor. It was a Lex Friedman podcast, and he was interviewing Mr. Beast, and Mr. Beast was saying like, did you watch it by any chance?
I have not. but
Okay.
I know who both of those people are.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It would be hard pressed to not know in today's age, but yeah. So like Lex Friedman was just asking Mr. Beast like tips for new creators, and Mr. Beast was saying, yeah, like for new creators, the best advice he could give is make 100 episodes and then get back to it. Like then ask him for more tips after that. Because he was just saying like every episode you can just pick one thing to improve in the next one, and he gave some tangible examples like better, like you could like change your inflections or better narration or like a better script or like he just named like 7 things like right off the top of his mind, but it just goes to show. And he also said like perfect doesn't exist. um uh like that's the beautiful thing about video creation is like there's literally not a single perfect video out there. And for him to say that, he probably puts the most like financial and like just like human effort into his videos and like the entire internet at this point. So for him to say that, it really goes to show that like um, we shouldn't be so paralyzed by wanting perfection that we don't even start. And our mutual friend also told me that um, there there's this idea that we shouldn't let perfection be the enemy of good. Um, I don't know if that's like biblical or where that's from, but it was really helpful for me because I often do that. Like I have this vision of perfection, and like it just hurts me so bad to not be able to implement that right away. And then sometimes like when you try to implement that, you just slow yourself down way too much, right? So, and then there's also the principle of like the Pareto principle, where like 80% of the work is done in 20% of the total time, and then the remaining 20% of the work, I guess like bringing it to a level of perfection, that'll take 80% of your time. So I guess the vision is if I can continuously devote 20% of my time to achieving 80% of the results in different arenas of my life, that's like the way that I would like to live my life. Just like, every day being comprised of these 20% segments that are like getting 80% of the results in different arenas. But obviously that's very hard to implement in reality, but that's just like that would be a good way to live, I think.
Yeah, I really I wish I could implement the eight like the 80/20 rule a lot more in my life. It's for me, I wonder if you struggle with this too, but like growing up, I was always taught the exact opposite, where like if I were to do anything sort of like quote unquote like half-assed, like it was like it was never quite good enough, right? If it
Mm,
was like if there was even like any hint of like, no, you could put in more effort, so you should, right? And I
yeah,
think like that was what I was conditioned to on how to operate and like live
likewise,
my
yeah,
my life
yeah,
was like, and I think it's really insidious to sort of have insidious not quite the right word. I think it's just really hard to like kind of switch that in your mind to like because now when you do 80% for 20% effort, you're going to feel like you're half-assing it. And
yeah.
what you've been taught is that when you half-ass, you are now deserving of um like ridicule or like uh not anything but praise. Right.
Hmm.
And so now you're having to like flip a switch in your head and be like, I'm half-assing it, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I just have to keep half-assing and like
yeah,
your mind can kind of get little like really like twisted in that way.
yeah, yeah. But I think like we come to a point in our lives where we just need certain results in certain interests to happen, and sometimes that requires unlearning some of these things that we've been conditioned to learn. Either by strict parents or like strict mentors that just you know encouraged us to use a lot of our time for a small amount of results, like bringing something close to perfection. Yeah, and it's definitely not the way to do it if you're trying to create content, I think. That's for sure. Because you'll just end up probably doing nothing and being stuck in analysis paralysis, maybe caused by a desire for perfection, like right off the bat. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah. I was wondering, what do you think your your job says about your personality?
I think it says that I'm one not that invested in money because this job is not that well paying.
Mm,
And I also think that it means that uh, I'm certainly willing to listen, if not even enjoy it. Um,
mm,
I don't know. I guess like we have to I think we first have to define a little bit more about like what even is personality and how important that is, to be honest.
oh.
Uh, because I think actually a huge part of like what I do actually is like breaking down one's identity and like self-beliefs.
Mm,
Because I think like what even is personality other than how a given person like reacts to different experience like get to a given like external environment, right? Like how does one behave in response to external stimuli, right? So I think like the way I see it is that like I think we can draw patterns about it, we can describe the personality, we can even start to predict like in X situation this person would react Y way, like, and that's all fine and dandy, but at the end of the day, like why does it matter?
mm.
You know what I mean?
Um, like maybe if you have a tendency to like fast-paced things, uh, but find yourself in a slow-paced job, like that shouldn't be a cause of concern.
Hmm.
Would that be like a realistic
No,
application of
okay.
what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that is a great great use of the of that. And I think like that's absolutely true. I think like the better that you understand how your mind and emotions maybe react to given situations, then you can start to make steps towards crafting an environment in which you are going to be feeling better or more in alignment or more um, content with like your life,
Wow.
which is absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think like so you're right. I think like that's probably like the best use of what personality is for. I think what ends up happening though, and this is completely natural, is that we instead of doing that, we start like comparing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we start being like, well, I'm this way and you're that way, and that makes me better or makes you better, and this other person worse, or so on and so forth. And we start to use the personality as a way to like judge other people,
Mm,
and then we like as we judge other people based off of those different personality traits, then we start to pay them more or less, or like value them more or less in society,
mm,
and give certain types of voices like greater significance and other ones like of less significance. So I think like you're absolutely right. I kind of failed to kind of recognize that, like, personality, the individual aspects of personality absolutely can be used to like craft a better life for yourself.
mm-hmm.
But I think where I tend to see so much suffering and issues in my job is that people get too attached to their personality. And
Mm,
in that attachment, they start to devalue or inflate their value based off of these essentially like labels that either they have placed on themselves or other people throughout their lives have placed on them.
mm. Wow. Just listening to what you said just now, like, you know how sometimes when you talk to some people, like, there's like these threads of logic that can like when they say something, you connect that to another topic. That's also like it seems really important. Um, when you were talking just now, I thought of like three or four different topics. And the sad thing is, I'm at my parents' place this weekend, so I don't have my whole setup. But usually I have like a
Mm-hmm.
dual screen or like three screens going on, and so I'll have like I typically like I get lost in all the ideas during a conversation, so I need to like type. um, and today all I have is my phone, so like I'm like losing some of the threads, but like Uh, it's just so I'm so excited because I feel like when I'm editing this, I'll find like I'll be able to like retrace certain tangents and probably maybe we can talk about it in the future. But there's just like yeah, there's so many points to go into. Like one of the things I was thinking about was um, that story. It's like or that analogy. I don't know what to call it, but someone gave the advice that like you shouldn't judge a fish with its ability to climb a tree, um, because it's
Hmm.
like uh, its edge or its competitive edge or its like special strength is to swim and breathe underwater. So like it would be it would be not right to judge it by its ability to climb the tree. But then that story can be applied in different ways. You could say like someone who is like more of a qualitative thinker in like a numbers job, like an accounting job, could be slow, and you could judge them, and be like, oh, that's that like you're weaker than me or something because I can think of numbers faster. Um, or you could apply it as like that fish and the fish climbing the tree thing is a bad story to teach people when they're going into careers because people will look at the way their personalities or natural inclinations are and see a mismatch with like maybe what they're doing in life and then will feel like they need to give up and go into a different career. So like the story could be well applied in that you shouldn't be judging other people for their weaknesses because they probably have strengths. Uh, or it could be like a story to like scrap and not like apply in your life because sometimes we have personalities that are different from maybe like the strongest, most profitable trait in our given job, and that's okay um, because you can still live that job and live a contented life as long as you know what your weaknesses and your strengths are. So anyway, and that's just like two of like
Hmm.
five different things that I thought of. So yeah, this is pretty exciting. So yeah. Anyway, thank you for being so insightful. Um, another thing that I just wanted to get in real quick.
Hmm.
I don't know if this is going to throw off a lot of listeners, but like League of Legends is a pretty popular game that you and I are both invested in. Um, and when I was talking about like the competitive edge, um, I just thought of like building Master Yi with like all tank items or something. Like that's
Yeah.
not how you play Master Yi. Um, so that's just like like a gaming example of like playing to your strengths in life. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm also thinking uh, like earlier when we were talking about how facing a lot of failure made you feel more comfortable in your own skin. I was just thinking of like in a video game, like we fail a lot on the journey to becoming better. Like, my brother is like a Yasuo one trick, and he is like,
God.
yeah, he's like incredibly good. Like he can play Yasuo. He used to watch like the arc something like a high level Yasuo player or like Yasuo the streamer. These like high level Yasuo players, and he kind of like learned how to play just like them or just make these insane plays. But that's after going many games like 0-10, feeding really hard, and like enraging his teammates. But like these are the experiences that we go through to become more comfortable in our own skin. So that's just like another gaming analogy of like uh, finding a pearl or solution to like a real life issue. And then I guess a third thing about League of Legends that I wanted to bring up was like uh, when you when you so what's your role in like what's your preferred role in League of Legends? Like support by any chance?
When I first, I've been playing this game for so damn long. I've probably played every role except Well, actually, that's not true. I started off as mid, and then I played support for a long time, and now I've been relegated to top because no one else wants to play top.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm currently a top laner. But I agree. I think like the kind of role that you pick does say something about your personality too, right? And I think like I'm so bad at the game that I would rather just go top lane and just like like suffer by myself and then let my team do their thing and carry and versus so I think in a weird way right now what my role says about me is that I kind of self isolate and I don't ask for I don't ask for help and I'll just you
Oh.
guys carry and I'll be relegated to top lane but
Mm,
this is just like within the realm of League of Legends I'm horrible at the game and I know that and so but I enjoy playing with friends so this is what I've like done but in terms of I want to like go on those analogies like further and even like refine them a little bit like I think I have used this analogy as well or a similar analogy of like what is the best strategy in league like what's the best strategy in league and like you ask four different people you're gonna get four different answers like some people
mm,
you've got the one trick ponies
mm,
right like your friend who's like a Yasuo main you've got the people who like play the meta right who like the whatever is the flavor of the month the most OP thing like yeah
mm,
that's the way that you win and then there are other people who are like there maybe for them winning is not winning the game it's actually just having fun
yeah,
and so like you have to ask yourself do
yeah.
you want to like win at the cost of potentially like maybe you play flavor of the month and maybe that gets you more wins and maybe you climb the ladder
Hmm.
but is that actually like fun are you actually enjoying your time is that
Yeah.
actually like a worthwhile
I,
use of your
I
time
I was the guy that
yeah
was like cynical at the flavor of the month strategies because I would just telescope out and be like, wait a second, I am a monkey pressing a button for like endorphins or or dopamine or whatever, like hitting
huh?
keyboard, dopamine, good, and then like hours of my life is gone, and I have to like return to that life eventually. So yeah, maybe I'd go for like the having fun is win condition.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at with like League, given that it's been so long. I've already decided like I'm not going to be good at this game. I will never quite reach the levels of I'm just not going to be good, and I'm okay with that. So might as well have fun. It's a good way to like bond with my friends and
Yeah.
have a couple of laughs and to like troll around. But like
Hmm.
beyond that, like I think I'm an advocate of like applying that same sort of philosophy even like to life. Like going back to your previous point about like I would say like making a lot of money is like essentially like climbing the ladder, right? Like you can climb the ladder and there are multiple ways to do that. You can play Fair of the Month, you can be an OTP, you can even just be real you can just play like a crap ton of Osu and get really good at like your mechanics and whatnot. Like that's
Hmm.
another these are all ways to like climb the ladder. But if you're not having fun, then like what's even the point of it?
Right.
Right? Is the way that I see like life too. Like if you're not enjoying yourself in like I guess life is a lot more complicated, right? So there
Hmm.
are material needs and whatnot, but like so once those are met though, like don't you think that you could so don't you think that you could at least align like some parts of your life that would be more like yourself and have like some level of like self-expression and self-understanding and then like slowly shift your way towards something that may not be as lucrative but and maybe not even be as successful status-wise money-wise so on and so forth but you enjoy the time that you have on this planet and maybe even have an impact and have some connection with like your buddies
Yeah.
right so I think like you were mentioning before of like I don't know if it's good or bad advice in terms of the fish and the monkey example. I actually have to disagree with that. I just straight up like if you're a fish, like don't try to climb. Like go do what is actually like comes naturally to you, what you're actually
Mm,
good at, what like other people notice and say like, "Hey, you're good at this thing." And most of the time we're actually really bad at identifying those things, which is
mm,
why I think like a lot of my career coaching side of things tends to be, "Hey, I think this is this is potentially what you're strong at. Would you like to pursue this in your job?" Even if it's not like do a complete quit your job, go back to school, do a go in a completely different direction. It could be can we express this in other areas of your job? Can we decide I do want more of that in my job, but it will take maybe one or two job transitions or title changes, or maybe it does require maybe a year or two of like part-time school
Mm,
so that we can get you closer to you are a fish who has been trained to like climb a tree your entire life. And like, yeah, you can do it, but just because you can doesn't mean that you should.
mm,
And I think like your life would be so much better spent doing the thing that, if we want to bring God into this, like I think that God designed you and created you for,
mm-hmm,
like the purpose that he like had intended for you. And I just don't I think like personally, I think like God's just a little bit smarter than to like have a bunch of fish climb trees just because. Like I think like God designed everyone individually for a purpose in mind, and I think like that's um like why not try to, God can't do all the work, right?
mm-hmm,
Um once you understand what your strengths are, what you find enjoyable, and I think it comes back to like checking in here and understanding what brings you joy, what comes easy to you, what's the thing that other people feel like is work but doesn't feel like work for you. Those are
mm,
beautiful places to start to think about where is your niche,
yeah.
right? Because if you're doing something that feels like work to other people, you will inevitably like surpass them, like
Yeah.
your competitors. So I
I
almost like
yeah.
forget about the competition and just like find what like I guess like that's your edge, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like you can either choose to not. I guess you could choose not to use your edge, but there's also like, yeah, I don't
I
see why
think
not.
you have to have a like a pretty tangible justification to choose to not use your edge in favor of a strategy that just gives like results, like flavor of the month or whatever. Like let's say that you're,
Hmm.
you know, to go back to the gaming analogy, I don't like it just because I know that I'm gonna lose like some listeners that aren't into League of Legends, but like let's say that you're like a one trick pony, like you only play this one character and you're super good at this character, and that's like your edge because you're willing to learn the matchups for this one character in a way that other people are not willing to. And again, this
Hmm.
might be me saying an analogy at like a very low level, like understanding of the game. Like it might not even work what I'm trying to say at a higher level, but just bear with me for a sec. If you
Yeah.
are willing to pour like a lot more time into learning the matchups, like your character versus another character, like how your character is able to beat a specific other character, that is in this analogy, that is sort of like um, uh, your edge, and you should probably maximize the time spent in your edge versus just dropping your character that you have all these mastery points on for like flavor of the month. That's just like the numbers are OP. Um, where was I even going with this? Um, uh,
I think
oh, however, I found the thread again. So,
good.
however, if you do end up going for like the OP flavor of the month strategy, like sometimes that can just get you out of that like zero LP you're about to demote moment, where you can like like
Sure.
sometimes like there is a rational justification for like giving up a little bit of your edge. Like there is something, like a lot of first first generation immigrants, like they work jobs that they don't love, but they like really care about providing for their families or something. Like there is a rational justification for all that suffering. But like yeah, if you can't even find that, I think there's probably some course correction to do, such that you should probably go for your, capitalize on your edge a little bit more. Um, but
Yeah.
I have a feeling that we're naturally just gonna we just have so much to talk about, and like there's like some element of like chemistry going on here clearly, like with like diving into topics and just understanding each other, which is really awesome. I really hope that we get to talk again. But I know that
Yeah, for sure.
you have like a meeting coming up soon, and I want to leave you some time to just like mentally, get ready for that. So, But just real quick, like I almost feel like I'd benefit from your career coaching. But just real quick, like is your job like can you take on clients like if they contact you directly, or how does that work? Like is there some kind of contact that people could reach you if they find you like helpful?
Um, the answer is yes. Like people could probably sign up for coaching with me if they wanted to. In terms of, I think like the easiest would be just through Discord.
Okay.
Um, and I think I can maybe give you my coaching Discord, which is separate than the one I'm calling you on. In terms of if you wanted to get career coaching, I don't know how serious that offer was, but I think like yeah, I think I would be happy to take you. Maybe I think I'm a little bit full right now, but maybe in a couple of months or so. But anyways,
Yeah.
it was great to meet you. I just wanted to also share that I feel very similarly. I think we could definitely talk for at least another hour, if not more. But I do really appreciate your consideration, and I do want to just take 10 minutes before I got another client to get to. But I'm sure that we will. Let's definitely set up another time to chat. And it was great to meet you, man.
Yeah.
Can't believe
Awesome, man.
that we like hit it off so well.
Yeah. Appreciate the conversation, man. Thank you for taking the time out and just enlightening me and whoever ends up listening to this with your ideas.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's great to chat.